Hello everyone, welcome to the second meetup of 2022. Who came to the meetup like 1 month before? Very interested. Oh wow, very nice. So this time we have very special guests. They come all the way to Groningen. I'm very excited. From Germany and the UK, and especially as I always feel like Groningen is so far away and people hardly reach it. So I'm very glad that they came over. A warm applause to Luc Downing and Marcel Vogel. So we will start the night with Luc, and he will tell a little bit more about testing and his experiences. This time we are able to bring our drinks inside, but I still want to say be very, very careful. We do not want to spill anything on the floor, so we can still keep this thing going on for next time. That would be nice. And if you have any questions for Luc after the presentation, we will have like a 50-minute Q&A, but you will probably also find them during the break time or yeah, whatever. And you can also, if it's an urgent question, I think it's fine for Luc if you just raise your hand. Is that okay? No? Okay. And ask a question then. So here you go. The stage is yours. Luc.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming. I hope to make it worth your time, and I'm sure Marcel will if I don't. And it's great to be at in-person meetups. Hopefully you'll be laughing with me and not at me, but we'll find out soon enough. I'm Luc Downing. I'm going to assume most of you have maybe heard of me in the Laravel community, but if not, look forward to getting to know as many of you as possible by the end of the event. This is Tales of a Test-Driven Developer. If you don't know me, there is one thing you should know about me, and that's I'm a bit of a testing nut. I love testing, and this talk is no exception. However, this talk is not about test-driven development, although we will do a little bit of test-driven development at the end so that I can make the talk make sense. But it's actually about being a test-driven developer, that is, using tests to drive your career as a software engineer forwards and hopefully improve your lives. So I hope you enjoy the talk and you benefit from it. A little bit of background information about myself. I work at an awesome company called Worksome. They're the home of freelance. They enable companies to hire freelance workforces. I actually get paid through the Worksome platform, so it's real good for fixing bugs fast, because otherwise I don't get any money, which is wonderful. But more specifically, I work on a small team called the Platform Core team. It's my job to make sure PHP's up to date, Laravel's up to date, our dependencies work, and also to make sure that the developers have the best possible experience when working with the framework, when working with developer toolsets. So I actually spend most of my time building open source tools because it's abstract and I don't need to work on anything super specific for Worksome. So yeah, I spend my days building cool open source tools, which makes me a bit of an open source enthusiast. You see some of the things I've either contributed to or created myself popping up. I hope to add to this list as my life continues. But I really love that we can give back to the community, that we have an opportunity to kind of provide something of value, because we've given or taken so much from Laravel, from Vue, from all of these amazing frameworks that we get for free. So it's outstanding that we get to give back. And obviously now I'm at a point in my career where I can come and give talks and talk to people and try and help them at the same time. That's awesome. I can't believe I actually get to do this and get paid in some form or another for doing it. It's absolutely insane. I will say that it wasn't always like that. And so if you'll permit me, I'm going to take you on a history tour of my career as a software engineer. It's not because I like to talk about myself, although I do like to talk about myself, but it's actually, hopefully, to resonate with a few of you who may be in the same position that I was in when I started my career as a software engineer, who want to improve, who want to get to the next level, but are not quite sure how to get there. So hopefully my story will resonate with you. I'm going to take you all the way back to when I finished school. I did quite well at school, and I decided with all of the knowledge I've accrued from school, I'm going to be a floor fitter. So I go into the industry of floor fitting, which is great for a year, and then I have no hair on my knees, and they kill, and it's quite boring because it's the same thing day in, day out. So I'm looking for something else to do. A good friend of mine, he comes up to me and says, I will pay you to leave your job as a floor fitter and come work for me as a software engineer. So he was crazy, but I absolutely snatched that up, and I joined him, his web agency, as a WordPress developer. I was a WordPress developer. We would churn out these client sites one after the other. It was great. And you know how it feels when you're first learning to code? It was absolutely amazing. You could type these letters in the IDE. It kind of looked like English. And then out of the other side would come a website and you get paid for it. So that was brilliant. For a couple of years, I was as happy as anybody could be. But after a couple of years, things started to change. My enthusiasm started to drop. And that was mainly because I wasn't really learning anything new anymore. And I was starting to see problems with my work as a developer. The main problem was that I had zero confidence in my abilities. So what would happen is the client would come along, and by the way, we weren't making brochureware sites anymore. Things had increased, and they were actually quite complex projects. So one was this crazy idea where they wanted to take a hotel booking API, which was a SOAP API, and they wanted to take an event API, which was a REST API, and they wanted to bring down different events and hotels live and combine them and put a premium on them and then sell them through the Stripe API. Now, I'd only ever used WordPress. So I built the entire thing in WordPress and WooCommerce, and sweat and blood and tears and hope and all the rest of it. And it was horrific, right? And then the back end was written in PHP, but I'm talking about PHP that people who hate PHP think about when they hear the word PHP. Right, so Apache pointing to .php files, and then you'd have .php in the URL in the browser, and then this giant script, and then at the bottom all this HTML that had so many echo statements in it, it was unreal. Like, to call it spaghetti code, spaghetti would be insulted. But yeah, and so trying to keep that up to date and maintainable and all the rest of it, it was so difficult. It wasn't really feasible, it wasn't possible. You wouldn't touch the upgrade button in WordPress. If you pressed that, you basically lost your job, right? We didn't have Composer, but if we did have Composer, you wouldn't dare type Composer update, none of that. And there were so many demos that I went into feeling confident, and then it would fall to pieces in front of the client, and then I would come out with egg on my face, and it would feel terrible. So I just had no confidence as a developer. Now, you can only go on doing that for so long before you think, I've got to be a floor fitter again, if I'm not careful here. So I decided before I quit and got back on my knees as a floor fitter, I was going to try and improve myself as a software engineer. So I decided to blame WordPress for all of my problems, and I look in the PHP community for an alternative. And I come across the Laravel framework, which seems to solve every issue I've come up against. What I was intrigued at when looking through the source code for Laravel was a directory called tests. I'd never seen that. Remember, I've come from WordPress. I'd never seen that before, so I open the test directory, take a look through it, and I see this list of classes. Each has a very descriptive title. Open up a class, list of methods, each very descriptive, and each method does more or less the same thing. Takes a small piece of the Laravel framework, executes it, captures the output in a variable, and then performs some form of assertion or expectation on the output to make sure that Taylor's vision for Laravel is realized. Now, that was interesting. I'd never really thought about the fact that code could test code. It sounds so simple and obvious, but I just didn't even think that was a thing. I thought the only way to test code is manually, to open a browser and check that things work properly. So that was a new concept, and I would like to say that at that point I took it upon myself to learn how to write tests, but I thought, oh wow, that's cool, and I put it to the back of my mind, and I rebuilt the entire client's application in Laravel, which was great, apart from all the bits that were my code, which were exactly the same as before, and within a few months the whole thing was back in terrible state, only this time instead of updating WordPress, it was Laravel that we couldn't update. So again, feeling rubbish, feeling like I was not a professional developer, feeling a bit like a hack and a wannabe and an imposter. I get a book recommended to me, and I think, why would I read a book? Like, we've got the web with videos and visual content. So I'd never read a book about programming, but it was The Clean Coder by Robert Martin. Anyone read The Clean Coder? Hey, some guys in the back. Thank you. Yeah, don't spoil it. Don't spoil it for the rest of them. It's a great book anyway. People say lots of things about the man, but the book is great. And what was interesting is there wasn't a code example in sight. Like, the book doesn't contain code examples, which was a bit shocking, but I read it within a couple of days. And then I reread it and started underlining things, which I never do. And I took away from it this one statement. If you can't prove that your code works, then you aren't a professional. And that statement resonated with me because it's exactly how I'd felt for years. I'd gone into client demonstrations with zero confidence. I couldn't prove with 100% confidence that my code was actually going to execute and work, so I didn't feel like a professional. Now, Robert Martin is an absolute zealot when it comes to automated tests. He goes on and on and on and on about it to the point where it's actually annoying, and I'm trying to copy his example. But I thought, you know what? I've seen this in Laravel. Now Robert Martin's going on about it and saying it's the holy grail for software. Why don't I just try it? Why don't I just try it? Why don't I learn to write tests and see what it does? So I want to be clear that this right here is the turning point in my career as a software engineer. It's a little bit difficult at first. My boss is like, no, don't really see the benefit in that one. No one else who's developing on the team wants to learn how to write tests. But I give the boss an ultimatum, and I basically say, if we're going to do this project, I'm writing tests. I kind of put my job on the line, I guess, a little bit, but he's a lovely guy, and he let me do it. Anyway, within a few weeks, we start seeing benefits. First of all, I can update composer dependencies without fear. The client demonstrations start going well, and that's a first. We're able to refactor and change things rapidly. We've never been able to do that before. We're able to plug in different components. We've never been able to do that before. Now, I'd never had a formal education. I was a floor fitter, remember? And I always thought solid principles and things like that, architecture patterns, were for the pros, and the people who have been to university and done courses. After a few months, I thought, what else have I been missing out on? So I read up on solid. And I realized that for the past couple of months, I've actually been writing following solid principles automatically. And the reason is that you can't write testable code without adhering to good architecture. So you automatically gain all of these amazing architectural principles just by writing tests and sticking to them. So that was like, wow, I've just 10x'd my development skill simply by writing tests and then writing the implementation. The client was so happy that he started recommending us to bigger clients. And we'd gone from making brochureware sites about campsites to working for some of the biggest names in the UK in travel insurance within 6 months. Now, my confidence eventually grows to the point where I think I am willing to share my code with the public. And I start writing open source. Some of those open source things are small, like a WordPress theme or I don't know, a little package that allows you to bind key presses in JavaScript in a fluent syntax. But people like them, and they actually start using them in their production applications because I have tests. So I must know everything, and I can prove that my code works. I am a professional developer. That was amazing. And so I think, oh, I can actually start contributing to other people's things. I start contributing to the Laravel framework. I contribute to some Sparsy projects. We've just switched, this is in the company by the way, I'm not talking about now. We've just switched from using PHP unit to Pest PHP at work. And I really like Pest PHP, it's beautiful, it's very nice to write, but there are a few features I think could make it better. So what do? With my newfound power of testing, I clone the Pest repository, I create some new features, and I back them up with Pest PHP tests in Pest PHP. And then I push this as a PR, and Nuno Maduro, the creator of Pest PHP, he likes what he sees, he merges it, and after a few of these contributions, he's like, okay, why not join the Pest core team? And I was like, yes! Because I would never expect that to happen. Like, overnight, my bubble of developers grew rapidly. People like Marcel, who I'd only ever dreamed of talking to before, were now a Telegram message away. Taylor Otwell, I could talk to him. Not that he would reply, but I could talk to him. So all of a sudden, I was in the big league. And all that just from writing tests. That was crazy. Now, there was one guy on the Pest PHP core team called Oliver Newbro. He's a brilliant developer, great mind. And after a few months being on the team, he says to me, hey, I work at this company called Worksome. Why not come work for us? You don't need to do a technical interview because I've seen what you can do. You basically work on your own terms, fully remote, we'll pay you really well, and you can work on the things you love. So I said yes. And now we're back to square one. That's kind of where I introduced. But do you see, like, if you trace it back, where all the good things that have happened in my career came from? The moment where I decided I would write automated tests. Now, why have I told you the story again? It's not about me, although it is about me. It's that testing can change your life too. I'm not saying that Nuno is going to have 50 new devs on the Pest core PHP team, but I am saying that there is no way that writing tests will negatively impact your career as a software engineer. It will only have a positive impact. So it is worth putting in the effort. Now, it's at this point that we get the buts. But this, but that. Anyone got any arguments that they've heard or even believe about automated testing? Come on, shout them out, please.
Client thinks it's expensive.
Client thinks it's expensive. Thank you. Any others?
Takes time.
Takes time. It does, Marcel. Any others?
What if they change stuff later?
What if they change stuff later? Yeah, changing requirements. Okay. I have compiled a list. I'm about to go on a bit of a rant. I apologize in advance. But these things are all things that stop developers getting on the road to testing. So I'm going to try and debunk as many of these as possible. Some of my arguments won't be as strong as others. Bear with me. And we can argue more about it after the talk. So testing is doubting. Basically, I am too good at coding to make mistakes. This is a real argument. This is stupid. To make mistakes. If I write tests, I'm really just saying I'm not a good developer. Well, this is stupid to start with. First of all, you're an arrogant person if you believe that. But you forget really that you're not writing tests for the here and now. I know that you can create a nice form in Laravel and that it will work now. You're protecting yourself in 6 months when your future you has completely forgotten about the class you've just created. And there you are thinking, I'm so awesome, I'm going to build this new thing, and this web form on the other end of the application breaks down. It stops working. And then, really, you've got egg on your face, haven't you? And you tried to cover that up because you think you're the best programmer and you don't make mistakes, so you probably blame someone else, but get blame will prove them wrong. And really, if we extrapolate this argument out and apply it to another industry, you start seeing flaws. Like, I took a Boeing jet to get here, right? Boeing are a really good company at making jets, but imagine if Boeing said, right, we're so good at making jets that we're not going to test the next jet because we'd be doubting our ability at building jets. Like, who here would ride a plane built by Boeing if they'd not tested the jet engine? Like, you'd be foolish to do so. So testing isn't doubting, testing is proving that you are worth the money that you get paid, you're worth the knowledge that you have. My client won't pay for that. I think we had that from back there, something along those lines, right? Most often, developers don't actually go up to the client and say, would you like us to make your application better? Would you like us to make it more secure, and would you like us to make sure we can maintain it for the future? They assume that the client won't pay for it because clients inherently want to keep as much money as possible, just like you would if you were asking someone to do a job for you. But let's flip it on its head. Why should you have to ask the client if they will pay for tests? You want an extension on the house, and you've got limited budget, so you get in as many builders as possible and you ask for quotes. Now imagine you say to the builder, look, you look like a decent builder. Can you skip the measuring tape, please, and just eyeball the whole thing? Because I ain't got really much money, and I don't really want to pay for the measuring tape as well. So if you could just do that. Now, if the builder turns around and says, yeah, of course, I'll sort that for you. Should you hire the builder? The tape measure really is the same as a test. It's our way of checking that things will work before the building goes up and falls down. So it shouldn't be an optional €5,000 add-on on top of the product. It should be part of how we work as developers. It should be built in, ingrained into how we write software. The client doesn't get a say. It's our tape measure. It takes too much time. Marcel, I think you said that one, didn't you? It takes too much time. It does take a little bit of extra time, but have you ever debugged an issue live? Right. So this may or may not be based on a true story. Your manager or CTO or whoever it is, they hand you an email and they say, we've had a bug. It's detailed in the email. Can you fix it? And you open the email and the email says, your product sucks. We just spent 10 minutes filling out a form and it broke. I want my money back. And you're like, oh yeah, the reproduction steps are clear. So you've got to try and work out what on earth went wrong, and you think, okay, let's get in touch with the customer. No, that's a bad idea. They're already sounding angry. I don't really want to aggravate them further. So what do you do instead? You go and impersonate them in the application. You pretend to be someone else online, and you fish around for a moment trying to work out where it might have broken, and then you realize, oh, I can't reproduce the error. So you SSH into the database, the live one, and you start looking around everybody's personal details, and there you are fishing through email addresses and actual addresses and relatives' names and all the rest of it, who's died recently in the family, all of this crazy information that we store in our databases. And finally, a relationship of a relationship of a relationship in the database has a JSON column, and the JSON column looks like it might not quite be formatted correctly for a specific user. But you can't be sure that's the problem, so you take all their personal information and you put it on your local machine, which I think is a complete breach of privacy, but you do it because you're just trying to fix the bug. So now you're pretending to be them locally, and you're trying to reproduce the error, so you go to the form and you fill it in and it's fine, and you fill it in again and it's fine, and you fill it in again, and finally it breaks. You think, I found it. But you haven't. You've only found where the error is in the UI. So then you pull out your favorite debugging tool, maybe Xdebug or Ray, and you start adding breakpoints everywhere. And then you run through it again. And finally, maybe after 5 or 6 hours of painful debugging where you're stressed and annoyed, and your engineering man is shouting at you because clients are leaving left, right, and center from this form being broken, you finally find the line of code. But that's only the start of the process. Because now you've got to fix the line of code, and you think you fixed the line of code, but when you run through the form again, it's still broken in a slight different way, so you have to fix it again, and you finally think you've fixed it, so you put it in a PR, and then whoever's reviewing your PR says, nope, that's not quite right, so then you have to go back and do the whole thing again, and then you put it in a PR, and it says, yeah, that's fine. And if you've got a QA team at work, the QA team are like, we'll take this now, and then 5 days later, they come back and they're like, we've just finished testing it, and it's still broken, so can you go change it again? And you go back to the start, and you do everything, and finally it gets past QA, finally it goes into production 3 weeks later, and you've had like 10 clients who have left and found a better product because you didn't fix the bug fast enough. So, yes, it takes a little bit of extra time to test, but it would have been like 10 minutes, and you've just taken like a week to fix the bug in production. The funny thing is that people who say it takes too much time to test also say, and we also test by hand. So we're covered. As if that is faster than automated testing. What they actually mean is we load the web page and we see it works, so we say everything's fine, and we ship it. That's not testing. That's just checking that your web server actually loads locally. Right, okay, who's got temporary code that's in production today? Yeah. Okay. I think the argument for this usually actually comes from slightly higher up than the developer world. It comes from CTOs or engineering managers or even clients that have too much input into the developer lifecycle. And what they actually mean is, we just want you to get it done as fast as possible, and as long as it works, we're going to put all the blame on you for the future of this thing forever and ever and ever, and if it ever breaks, that is your fault. So what you actually do when you agree that the code is only temporary is you basically say, I will take responsibility for this for the rest of my life, and I will take all the stress, and they're going to take all the glory and honor and power for the thing just working in the first place when you first demo it to the client. This is a trap. It is one of the worst things anyone could ever say, and if you say yes to it, you are only tricking yourself. The code is never temporary. Even if you're just adding a few tests here and there, you will save yourself so much pain in the long time. It's a legacy code base or an inherited code base. Well, we all hate legacy code bases. It's horrible working on old things, but one of the best ways of learning how that thing is put together and also finding the weak points that you need to re-architect is to write tests. Now, I'm not saying that the Worksome code base is legacy. It is not. But one of the first things we have new hires do is write tests, because it gives them a better understanding of how the application is put together, how it works, how they can add their own APIs in the future, how they can plug in to what's already there. So testing will give you the know-how to be able to maintain that product going forwards. And also, if it's legacy, it's probably on like Laravel 5 or something. Also, if you've written tests, you might even have the confidence to compose or update. Wouldn't that be nice? So tests for legacy code base is just as important. We don't understand the product well enough yet. What are you putting in your if statements if you don't understand the product well enough yet? You are creating the product. If your excuse is, oh, we don't really know what we're writing, that's not really an excuse, is it? You're the developers. You have to understand the product to be able to create the code in the first place. If you don't understand the product, go back to the client or your CTO or engineering manager, or even put on your Jira ticket if you're using something like that. I don't understand this. Can we have a meeting? Can we sort it out? Can we make sure I have a full picture before I start? There is another side of this, which is we're prototyping. I understand that. Prototyping is slightly different, but be careful because prototyping can actually be, where is it? This code is only temporary. Yeah. So just be careful because that's also a synonym for that one, so you need to be careful of that. This one is legitimate. It is so hard when you're so enthusiastic and you finish this talk and obviously you're all going to be absolutely hyped for testing, and you go back to the company and the guy's like, no, or your boss is like, no. It's so difficult to push against that. But I can tell you from experience that I did that, and within a few weeks, guess what? Everyone started jumping on board because they realized that the benefits were huge. They realized that they were going to be left behind if they didn't start writing tests fast. So set the example, everything else will follow. The only real truth is that it takes effort to learn, but it isn't that much effort. Like, you already know the programming language, you've done the hardest part. You understand how a language works. Testing frameworks, yeah, you have to learn a testing framework, but they're designed to be small and minimal and get out of your way. That's the whole point. So you don't have to learn much about that. The real thing you have to learn is how a test is constructed. And once you have that, which is maybe 2 days of watching videos and learning, you're set for life. So it takes effort to learn, but the effort is well worth it. Now, I want to say thank you so much for listening to my rants and everything I've said to this point. I'm going to do some live coding. Forgive me. I want to show you how easy and simple it is to get started testing in Laravel. Laravel has amazing testing tools. I'm going to show you in 2 different testing frameworks. The first is very good for matching what you might think of if you've been used to testing manually in the browser. It's an end-to-end testing framework called Cypress. It's absolutely brilliant. It's written in JavaScript, and it's really good for mimicking manual testing. And then later on, I'll switch to Pest PHP, which is much closer to the metal. It allows us to write unit tests. And we'll use Pest PHP to build out some features using TDD, test-driven development. And you can see the power of using test-driven development in your code. OK, so first of all, Cypress. I'm going to jump to the terminal here. Cypress is an npm dependency, and we can launch it using npx cypress open, like so. Now you'll see that Cypress has its own UI, its own interface, super simple to get started with. I'm going to click into end-to-end testing here, start end-to-end testing in Chrome. It's going to launch a Chrome browser, and I'm going to create a new empty spec, which is just a test file. I don't know why they have to call it spec. And we'll say roots.cy.js. Let's jump into our IDE, and I'm going to load up the old roots.cy.js file that's just been created. Now, quick breakdown. The describe function is basically what is every test in this file doing. So you give it a nice English description. And then inside the closure, which is the second parameter of the describe function, you're going to put all your tests in this file. And those tests always start with the it function. Again, a nice string. You can write that in any language because it's a string, which is really nice. And then the second closure where you actually write your test code. So in this case, we're wanting to test that all of the routes in our application actually work. Now you're going to need to know what the application is. So let's jump into our browser. This is ParrotCon. ParrotCon is the greatest convention and most well-organized convention of all time. There are 3 pages on the ParrotCon website. The home page, as you can see here, the about page, and the schedule page, which you can see here. Some great speakers for ParrotCon. One of the biggest and best tests you can actually create when you're first starting is just making sure these pages load. That's going to save you so much time, especially if you have a landing site that's got 50, 100 pages. If you can just write tests that will make sure all of those load, so much time saved, and you're going to have so much more confidence when you ship. So let's write those tests for these 3 pages in Cypress. Back to the IDE. I'm going to change this description here, and we'll say describe the routes load successfully. And then in the description for the actual test, which is this, we'll say it can load the home page. And we have this CY object here. CY is short for Cypress, if you'd not already guessed. And it's a global object that Cypress makes available where we can interact with the Chrome browser or whatever browser we're using for testing. Now, visit is actually exactly what we want in this scenario, because visit is going to fail if there is a problem with loading the page. It already does most of the work for us. So all I have to do is change the URL to meetup.test, and I'm going to jump into the Cypress runner, head into routes.cy.js, and hopefully you're going to see a passing test. There we go, a little green tick. The real nice thing about Cypress is you actually see the output in the browser here. You can scroll through it, you see exactly what the state was when it called visit in the browser. Super nice. So nice, especially if you're coming from manual testing. Just to show you that this actually does something, by the way, I'm going to go into the home blade and I'm going to add something that's going to cause a syntax error and reload these tests. And you'll see we actually get a nasty red cross this time, and we get this message here saying 500 internal server error, which means something's gone terribly wrong and you should not ship to production yet. Brilliant. Let's revert the change, come back, rerun, everyone's happy. So we can obviously now go and copy and paste this, just like that. We'll change this to about, and schedule, and then back to Chrome, wrong Chrome, back to this Chrome, and I've done something terribly wrong. Let's have a look. Anyone see what I did wrong there? Yeah, this will be it. Let's try again. There we go. 3 passing tests. So, and that ran, by the way, in 362 milliseconds. And I'll also say that I'm screen recording and sharing to multiple monitors, and this is an Intel MacBook. So can you imagine how much faster it will run when you're on your M1 Pros at home? Brilliant. And you can see that what we can do is go into each of these tests, and I can click here, look, I can see exactly what's going on. You can go so much deeper with Cypress. You can take screenshots, you can resize the viewport, you can take video captures, you can send those video captures over to your clients or whatever you want to do in order to very quickly get verification that your application is working. Okay, that's enough of Cypress. We're going to go closer to the metal and take a look at Pest PHP. I can't believe the time. Let me close this down because this is going to cause problems. Right, so if you take a look at the home page, we have this little sign-up form where people can register their interest in ParrotCon. If I click Notify Me, you'll see it does nothing. We've not built this feature yet. So we want to build this feature in the sign-up controller, but I want to write tests alongside my implementation. Now I'm actually going to start writing tests before my implementation. I'm going to show you how to do that in Laravel. It is so simple. Okay, let's go back. Let's open up our IDE again, and I'm going to go to this test file that I've created in advance. Now, the most important thing about the process of test-driven development is that you have a clear user story. You need to know what you're about to write. So I've created this user story perhaps from a Jira ticket or perhaps from something that the engineering manager sent me. There has to be a sign-up route. It redirects to the home page. A user should see a success message. It should receive a required email and country. Creates a new sign-up in the database. Email has to be unique. Okay? Fairly straightforward, fairly simple. You start TDD with a test, and you'll notice that Pest PHP syntax is very similar to Cypress. You learn one testing framework, you've almost got a handle on all of them. So I'll say it redirects to home. And in this function, we have to make a request to the signup. Now we'll use Laravel's testing tools for this. We'll make a post request to signup, and I'm going to pass some data in here. I'll pass an email. We'll say luke@downing.tech. And I also want to pass a country. I'll pass GB. And then I'm going to capture the response in a variable here. So response equals this post. Now because this is Laravel's testing helpers, we can perform many different methods on this response object. And one of those is assert redirect. So I can say response, assert a redirect to the home page, just like that. Now if I go to my terminal and run PHP artisan test, which I've shortened to PAT, you'll see that we have a failing test. You may worry about this, but when you're doing TDD, you want a failing test. So you always should start TDD with a failing test. Just read the message, tells you what's wrong. In this case, we wanted it to redirect, which are these status codes here, but you actually received a 200. In other words, you've not written any implementation, so you need to write that, please. Back to the IDE, let's go to this signup controller, and I'm just going to solve the failing test, nothing more. So I'll return a redirect to the home page. Back to the terminal, PHP artisan test, we have our first passing test, which means that part of the feature is implemented. Back to the IDE, back to the test.php file, take a look at the next line of our user story. The user should see a success message. So I'm going to copy this here. I'm going to say it shows a success message. And then we'll have a closure. And we're going to put the exact same code in here. And I'm going to say, again, using Laravel's test helpers, response assert session has a success key. And let's make the message equal to thanks for signing up using luke@downing.tech. So I'm taking the email address from the payload and I'm asserting that that's been placed in the session. Again, we go to the terminal, run PHP artisan test. We have our second failing test, so now we implement it. Back to PHP Storm, into the signup controller, and I can chain, as many of you will know, a with method onto the redirect, where I can say there should be a success message that says thanks for signing up with request, email, exclamation mark. Back to the IDE, run the test suite again. We have an error, but the error message has changed. And this is what's so great about TDD. You catch these things before they're ever a problem in production. So the error message tells us that we were supposed to use the word with, or we're supposed to use the word using, but we actually used the word with. So what we need to do is just change this to using here, and let's come and run PHP artisan test again, second passing test. We've caught the problem, we've solved it. Okay, let's carry on the TDD cycle. We'll go back to test.php. You can see here it has required email and country fields, so it has required fields. Again, we need to make the request to sign up. Very simple. We make a request with post and we pass these parameters here, but because I'm checking that if you don't pass them you get validation problems, I'm going to remove the payload. So I'm just going to remove all of these fields, and again I'll use Laravel's testing helpers. You can just scroll through this list until you find what you're looking for, to say that there is a validation error on the fields email and country. Simple as that. PHP artisan test. It's going to say there were no validation errors. So you know the drill by now. We jump back into the signup controller and we say request, validate, and I'm going to pass some validation rules. We'll say email is required. We'll say country is also required. Like that. PHP artisan test. 3 passing tests. You see how fast the TDD flow is, by the way? I'm not spending ages writing the tests. I'm not spending ages in the application code. I'm very quickly able to churn these out. And by the way, in 0.10 seconds, I get 3 tests that give me confidence this feature works. We're almost at the end of this feature. Let's just take a look at what else we're going to do. Creates a new sign up. So we want to check something's been put in the database. So it creates a sign up. Add the closure, we'll put the response in there, and I'm going to use another Laravel testing helper, this time accessed on the test case itself, which is assert database has. I'm going to check that the database has a sign up with the following fields, and I'll copy these fields here and paste them in. Let's go back to the terminal, PHP artisan test. We have another failing test that we can now fix, so back to the signup controller. I'm going to say sign up, create, and we'll say let's pass in the email, which is the request email. Let's pass in the country, which is the request country, and we'll jump back into the terminal, PHP artisan test. We're almost at the end. This is brilliant. We're working so fast here, and TDD is proving that everything works correctly. Obviously, I'd be even faster if I wasn't babbling in between. So it requires a unique email. So what do we do here? Well, we need to actually add a step in before making the request in Laravel, and that is to fill our database with a signup that has our email. So I can use Laravel's model factories for this. I'll create a signup factory with luke@downing.tech as an email address. And this is going to fill my database with that signup. Then I'll make my request as usual. Okay? And again, I'm going to say response assert invalid, and I'm looking for the email key. Run PHP artisan test again. We have our final failing test, so let's fix this. I'm going to fix this in a slightly weird way, but I see this kind of code all the time. We'll fix it in just a moment, I promise. I'm going to say if signup where email is equal to request email exists, then throw validation exception with messages email. The email must be unique. I Nice and simple, PHP artisan test. Okay, all of our tests pass. We'd be quite confident in this feature now. But the thing is, if you write a feature without tests, you're then so afraid that you're going to break something if you touch the code again, that you just ship it in its current state. But with TDD, we now have proof that this works, which means we can alter the code as much as we want until we're happy. And as long as the tests still pass, you're still good to ship it. So let's take a look at what we might change in the controller. First of all, this is horrible. There is already a unique rule in Laravel that we can use to solve for this. So I'm going to remove this code here, and instead I'm going to try this. Unique in the signups table under the email column. Now, we run our tests again, everything still passes, so I'm happy it still works. A successful refactor. What else can we change? Well, actually, request validate returns a data object here. So let's say data instead of accessing from the request directory. Or directly, I should say. We have a failure. We have 3 failures, actually. And this is because data is actually an array. So you catch small things like that that you might miss in the refactor otherwise. I'm going to change that to array syntax. Run PHP artisan test again. Everything's good. You send this for a PR, and someone reminds you that you're just using the exact same fields here and here. So very quickly, you change this just to data instead. And again, you make sure everything works with PHP artisan test, and you're happy that everything works, so you ship this and it goes into production. And for the rest of time, this will prove that everything works forever in 0.15 seconds. It doesn't matter how many features you continue to add to your application, it will always prove that it works. So that is test-driven development using Pest PHP and Laravel. Let me quickly finish. Did I start late or something? So hopefully I've encouraged a few of you at least to maybe take testing more seriously, try testing. If you are interested in testing, and by the way, none of these companies endorse me or sponsor me in any way. But if you are interested in testing, I have some great courses I would recommend. Sparsy, you probably use 1 million of their packages in your Laravel applications already. They do an excellent course called Testing Laravel. It's in Pest PHP and PHP unit flavors, so choose whichever one works for you. Code Course, if you want something for free, who doesn't? Have a course called Up and Running with Pest. I cannot believe how good the production quality is to say that that is free content. You should not miss that. And Laracasts, which we probably all know and love, have some amazing courses on PHP Unit and on Cypress.io. So if you're interested in Cypress and what you can do with that, check out Jeffrey's course on Laracast. It is well worth your time. With that said, you can find me on Twitter at LukeDowning19. I would love as many of you who are not following me to follow me because I love the validation that gives me. You can find my blog at downing.tech. I've put all of the things that people usually ask down here. Does anyone have any real questions? Feel free to come up to me after as well because I'd love to talk longer about this. Anyone got any questions? Please.
What's the difference between Laravel Dusk and Cypress?
Oh, me and Marcel. I'm hanging down there 1 second. Me and Marcel were literally talking about this earlier. So they both accomplish the same task. Dusk is written in PHP. So if you really love PHP and you don't like JavaScript, go with Dusk. Cypress seems to be a bit faster than Dusk. So that, and also if you've got front-end developers who don't know PHP, well, they're usually the ones testing UI flows. So Cypress is perfect for them because they're writing in the language that they actually create things with every single day. So they're more likely to write tests that way. But yeah, whichever one works for your stack, really. Anyone else?
Best practice to start in with tests in project without tests?
Yeah, so the best thing you can do is either use Cypress to do end-to-end tests first because that's the biggest bang for your buck, or you can use the same test that we were just doing in Pest and try to cover as much as possible. And sometimes that will cause problems, like you'll hit a third-party API and you're like, oh, we can't really be doing that in our tests. That will highlight where the problems are, and then you can start making those changes. Try and get basically as much bang for buck per test as possible, and only when you've got those in place should, what I recommend at least, that you then dive deeper to the lower level and start doing unit tests. Hope that makes sense? Anyone else?
In more complex applications, I've seen that sometimes it's hard to actually assure that the quality of the test is okay. Like sometimes the edge cases of functionality are not really covered by the test. And how do you assure that the test really covers the functionality?
Okay, yeah, so this is a terrible metric, but there's something called a coverage report. Coverage report will tell you how many lines of your code are tested. It will not tell you the quality of the test. It will just tell you if you've missed an if statement somewhere that needs to be tested. So it's super useful for checking what tests am I missing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you've tested all of the possible edge case of the application. The only way you'll know that is if you actually go and make sure by looking through. I mean, there are mutation testing frameworks you can use, which will try and tell you where you might have missed different edge cases, but I would just stay away from them while you're getting started with testing. Concentrate on the basics. You know, every test you add is going to improve things rather than regress things, so just get started and then obviously further down the line maybe look into mutation testing.
To follow up on that, how do you feel about like behavior-driven testing or something like that?
Can you expand?
Well, have you heard about Behat?
Yep.
What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, fine. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you've got to choose the main test stack that works for the most developers in your team, right? So if all of your developers work with PHP, super comfortable with PHP, understand maybe classes, I wouldn't recommend Pest. If they prefer working in class style and you're going to struggle to use Pest with them, I would recommend PHP Unit over Pest. If your developers maybe like working on the front end and the back end, and they're used to working with JavaScript's very functional style, Pest is going to fit perfectly. So not even different testing frameworks will fit different teams. So I would just say maybe try one or two, see which one developers cling on to, and then use that going forward.
Have you ever used the Laravel shift test generator?
Yes.
It's recommended?
It's better than no test, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like if there's a program out there that will give you free tests for your application, absolutely go ahead and do it. But just be aware that it's not the same as manually going in and writing tests. So don't rely on that to cover your entire application. Anything else? Are we good there?
Last question.
Yeah. Where did we have the burger?
Oh, it's called I want to say burger. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. It was great. Yeah. Cool. If that, like I say, please come and say hello after. I would love to talk more about it anyway. So feel free to come and say hi and ask questions again. Thank you very much.
We will have a short break. Feel free to eat a little bit more.
Is that?
Yeah. Sorry, break a little bit. Be careful with the glasses.
Yeah, it's good.